Well, as we continue our worship, we have had a beautiful opportunity already to be led in prayer, pray together as a family, sing these beautiful hymns of adoration and praise, teaching one another in songs and hymns and spiritual songs. We'll have a moment here to partake of the memorial feast where we proclaim Christ's death until He return. We'll have an opportunity to give as we have been prospered. But now let us turn our minds to God's Word as we study. This week concludes, and don't say yippee. Everybody has their own thoughts about series, right? I'm not a big series guy, but I thought in the midst of the summer, as we continue to fan the flame, as it were, we could go through these great Beatitudes. So we find ourselves in the last of these 8 installments of the Beatitudes. Mentioned to you that it has been said by some that the Sermon on the Mount is kind of like our Constitution of the United States. Therefore, the Beatitudes would be like the preamble. And so having that mindset, we finalize our studies today in the price to be paid. You know, it is the case that we are often examining cost. As we go to build a new home, we have to think about the cost that is going to be involved, and can we sustain such a thing for so many years? As we prepare to be married, as we prepare to have children, all of these type of things are moments in time when we are called upon to count the cost. Luke 14 is one of those locations. We will not stay there today, but please remember that it was there that Jesus mentioned the idea of counting the cost. And so even as we relate ourselves to these great Beatitudes, we have had a great and wonderful list of things that we can find true happiness in. And it ends today, before he moves on, paraphrasing, that there is a cost to be paid. And so he asks us today to consider that cost. As you think about what we have seen, there are those moments in the Bible where we stop and wonder, how do I use that? How do I use that in my study? Here's the example. If something is said more than once, Galatians 1, as I said before, so say I now again, right? We see those things as important. Luke 13, 3 and 5, right? About repentance, said more than one time. Well, in like fashion, could I point this out to you? As we have studied over the last 7 sermonic thoughts, we have seen these statements. The first series that we looked at, being poor in spirit, came from simple statement of 13 words. Spoke for 35 minutes on that. And as we went through that, notice that it was the simple sentence construction that brought about all of our sermonic thought. And so here's an example of what it is that we looked at over the last 7 weeks. And so notice how simple and direct the Master uses grammar, his words that he puts together. You say, well, what's the point? Here's the point. As we finish today in this particular thought, even though blessed is used 2 different times, I pull this together as one beautiful statement, and I would suggest to you today that it is of great importance because notice the comparison. 62 words, 3 verses instead of 1. And so as I remember back through our studies, back through opportunities that we've had to study together, you remember the statements like, Christ taught on hell more than he did heaven. Mathematically speaking, as you look through the gospel accounts and study his teaching, what does that say to you? Must be pretty important, right? Same thing is true here, I believe. And so it was from this standpoint that I launch out into our discussion today, noticing that Jesus is impressing upon us something of huge importance. And again, it's no mistake that it comes as a final statement following those things that conduct our lives in true happiness. It was over in John 15. that it was Jesus that stood before them and said, they have persecuted me and they're going to persecute you. These 62 words that are in this finalization of the preamble shows us that there is something that is coming my way. I need to be ready. Remember John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Right? He is constantly giving us comforting words. And so here, this is a continued warning, as it were. And so in verses 10 and 11, as he says, blessed are those who suffer persecution for righteousness' sake. Psalm 119, verse 172, you remember what it says? All thy commandments are righteousness. For righteousness' sake. Those that are suffering, those that are facing that which is coming, the purpose of it is my sake, for my name. Which causes us to think about many things. He uses in verse number 12, where we start today, the idea of those that have already been through this. Do you recall what Romans 15 and verse 4 says? Those things that are mentioned aforetime, written aforetime, were for our learning and for our admonition. How powerful is that when Jesus himself uses those things that are written aforetime? When he goes back into the scriptures and he tells us that we are called upon to remember others who have already been down this same road. And so in verse number 12, he says, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. You can expect it because others have already gone through it. It's going to continue, as it were. And so, as you think about this statement, what may have been in the mind of Christ? When he mentioned those that had been before, yes, he used the word prophets, and we can go on. We'll find ourselves in Hebrews 11 in a moment. But please remember, Abel was murdered. Why was Abel murdered? Well, Cain was mad. Righteousness. Remember verse 10? For righteousness' sake. He offered that which was right according to God. Joseph was sold because of righteousness, ultimately jealousy, envy. But then as you find him in Potiphar's home, running from Potiphar's wife, why was he in prison? Righteousness. You think about Moses. Moses, as you look even into the account of Numbers chapter 12, chapter number 14, over and again, those that are considered righteous in the Bible, we find persecution in their lives. And so Jesus reminds us, look back, guys. Daniel, prophet, Micaiah. There are individuals that Jesus calls upon us to remember they were absolutely persecuted. Another thing that I thought about right about here was in Matthew 23. That's a hard chapter to read, isn't it? As Jesus is revealing the sin of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, those religious leaders of the day, and he refers to them in such terminology as whited sepulchre, den of vipers, hypocrites. Well, it is here in this particular passage that he points out this of olden time. And along about verse number 35, it says that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel, we just mentioned him, right? Even unto Zechariah, who was slain between the temple and the altar. Over and again, we are reminded to reflect on those that have walked before us. Hebrews 11, if you will, turn there for a moment. Remember, Jesus has called upon us now to remember those that were persecuted even before the moment in time that he spoke these very words. Now, some years later, as this particular epistle was written, the same thing is coming forward. Remember those. Read with me, if you will, beginning at verse 32. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David also and Samuel, and of the prophets who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, and being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts, and in mountains, and in dens, and in caves of the earth. Jesus calls upon us here to remember those that have walked before us. Don't we often do that in regular settings? Think about those that have gone before us. You know, it is a fact. We stand on the shoulders of giants in many different situations. Mother and I had an opportunity this last week to watch some history. And we looked at the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, as it were, the history of the United States, the history of the world even, the wars, the Depression, the various things that have gone before us. And the ultimate lesson from that is look where you are now, based upon what others have done for you. Well, that's the call of Christ, isn't it? Look where you are now. And He is calling on us now to be realizing that persecution is something that you will face. It's something that is coming your way. But don't worry. God is with you. And there's a great blessing at the end of that. And so as you look through the New Testament, we have opportunity to see that that was actually realized. Why did John the Baptizer die? Well, it was the dance and all of that, obviously. But why was he in jail? You have no right to have her as a wife. Speaking for righteousness, wasn't he? Speaking up for God. Stephen, why was he killed? Righteousness' sake. Those that were in the way, Acts 9 and verses 1 and 2, when Saul was leaving, headed toward Damascus, who was he looking for? Righteous people, Christians, those of the way. James, and that wasn't good enough, was it? The people were so enthralled by this killing of James, one of these Christians, that they had Peter set on the block, ready to go, right? But God had something to say about that. And it really goes without saying. You think about 2 Corinthians chapter 11, there's that long list of things that Paul experienced, remember? So it is something that was realized, and Jesus himself, after speaking these words, would later do what? Suffer persecution himself. Ultimately giving his life for you and me. And so it is something that you can expect. It's something that was realized by them even later on in their lives. Peter said it this way. Peter said that Christ suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God. That's his purpose. Came to save sinners, 1 Timothy 1:15. He is here to bring the lost to God. That's his purpose. Titus 2 and verse number 14 says that he gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity. Now, the realization is what we're talking about here. Those things that they would realize and have an opportunity to reflect and say, wow, I remember the day he told us about that. As the sword was about to come across the neck, Jesus warned me about this. Jesus told me this was coming. I found this on the internet. Not exactly sure who put this out there, but this is a historical record, not an inspired record. But history records that all, save John, died the martyr's death. Persecuted, suffered, even for righteousness' sake. Acts chapter 5, as they left the beatings, they were counted worthy to suffer for his name's sake. And so over and again, they realized it themselves that what he said would come to pass. And so he continues to warn, even to the brethren in Revelation 2 and verse number 10. It's coming. You can expect it. And so the realization is, don't fear, Matthew 10 verse 28, what man can do to you. Fear the one that can destroy both body and soul in hell, as was mentioned in class. So that it is a real thing. Persecution is something that has been happening. As you go back and look at those that have walked before us, it is something that was realized in the lives of the apostles, the disciples, even the ones that Saul was chasing to Damascus, you remember? But it is something that we should recognize is real in our lives. Now, when you think about recognizing persecution, I would be the first one to tell you, if the Lord is gracious, we shall not see the things that our ancestors have seen. You would probably agree with that. And I hope that that's the way it stays. However, you and I both have seen images such as this, have we not? Now, this was a group of Catholics that were slain on the coast of Libya. They obviously refer to themselves as Christians. And so the headlines were, Christians slain on the coast of Libya, right? Is it real? It's absolutely real. These individuals, they would not bow to Islam. And so these right-wing enthusiasts of the Islamic Party did that for all the world to see. And it's out there. If you look hard enough, you can watch exactly what happens. You know, when we have problems at work oftentimes, I don't know if I probably have told this before, but there was a period in time that my dad was told, you get that Bible off your desk. He worked for the government. They told him, you get that Bible off your desk. He didn't. So then they started to threaten him with promotions. You'll never see promotions as long as you got that Bible on your desk. It's real. It's really real. And maybe if you've lived long enough, you've known somebody that's been through this experience, harassment at work. You want another Sunday off? And so they start making it hard on you, so that ultimately you'll just quit. You seen it? You done it? You know somebody that's been down that road? You think about as employee to employee, neighbor to neighbor, various situations that arise in our lives where we are ostracized. She is Little Miss Perfect, always wearing the modest dress, always telling us as she looks down her nose at us how sorry we are. These are types of persecution, not first century persecution, but these are things that really happen on this side of eternity, right? They do happen. Sadly, even school kids see it. Making fun of her. I remember, it is what it is, but I was lucky enough to grow up in a Christian home. Everybody else around me was going to the prom and all these Sadie Hawkins dances and all these various things, and my parents said, you'll not go to those because of the improprieties that go on there. I didn't really even go to football games, really, because of cheerleaders. That's just something that I grew up with personally. And you know how I was treated? Made fun of me. Parents won't let you go to prom. It's a real thing. It is absolutely real that even our school kids today are facing persecution. Is it any wonder that as our children grow up and they make it out into the real world that they don't return to the church house? They're tired of the ostracization. They're tired of the persecution. And so it is something that is real, but I would point this out. As you have opportunity to talk to your children, as you have opportunity to talk to your spouses or to your employers, etc., please be reminded that Paul said it's just a light affliction. Now, this comes from the guy that was shipwrecked, who was left for dead in Lystra. This comes from the guy that had been through nearly as much as Christ suffered. And he says, your light affliction? Oh, they made fun of you. You mean you had to go find another job? You see, when we look into passages like Hebrews 12, verses 3 and 4, the recognition that it is real, it should comfort us. Acts 5:41, being counted worthy to suffer. And realize that when they make fun of you, when you have to change jobs, when whatever happens, it happens. I remember as a youngster as well, we would move from our membership from one congregation to another because of maybe an eldership's decision or something that was not sound in the faith. And so guess what happened? I had to make new friends. I had to start all over again. My sister, when she turned 18, she was gone. Never looked back. Because she said, all you people do is fight. That's not true at all, is it? What she saw was contending for the faith. Jude verse 3. It was fighting the good fight. Dad was doing exactly what God had commanded him to do. And so, my friends, when you read verses like Hebrews 12, verses 3 and 4, remind yourself, you've not resisted unto blood. None of us will probably see a cross. None of us will probably never see the scourging post, will we? But will we have a door shut in our face? Will somebody hang up on us and then block us from calling them again? Will they speak ugly to us? You might have to find another job. You have not resisted unto blood. One of the points that I would share with you today as it relates to this, that on the other side of whatever it is that you may be facing, ostracization, whatever level of persecution you may have the opportunity to face, please recognize that there's blessings on the other side of that. You don't initially see it, but on the other side of it, what's the end of Job chapter 42? He was doubly blessed because he came through it in a faithful fashion. What happened to Jesus after he was crucified? God raised him from the dead just as he has promised. And where did he send him? He sent him right to his right-hand side to rule over all things to the church. Ephesians 1, beginning of verse 22. Great blessings on the other side of persecution. These light afflictions that Paul said. And so, my friends, please understand that one of the great things that can be said about blessing, about these particular moments of persecution, these trials, these sufferings, there is great blessing on the other side. And so endure them with patience, whatever form they may take. 2 Timothy 3, verses 11 and 12, Paul said, what persecutions I endured, but out of all of them the Lord delivered me. He will deliver you too. That's the whole point of this statement. Understanding that they will come. You remember the example of falling into the arms of someone else? You know, some of these things that we do at work and scouts and things of that nature, it builds trust. That's what 2 Timothy 3 verses 11 and 12 is about. We are developing trust as we go through every one of these trials, these sufferings, these persecutions. We become more trusting in the King of the world, Jesus Christ. And so, it is the truth that all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. It's coming your way. It is in your life. It will be here. You can count on it. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse number 58. No matter what we do that is in the name of the Lord, there is nothing that is in vain. And so remember, in passage such as this, as the book is even coming to a close, we are reminded that even our laboring, another gospel meeting, really? Another Bible bowl? Another? Nothing is in vain. Nothing that you will do in the name of the Lord is in vain. And so we go through these things. And so when we see Matthew 5 and verse 12 at the end of our study, this 8th study, please understand, he says, great is your reward in heaven. And so going through these faith-building exercises, they cause us to see the blessing that is going to be on the other side, the trusting that we are building, the way that we are growing. 2 Peter 3 and verse 18. We are a people that understand that there is a crown waiting for me. You know, the book of Hebrews is all about those that grew weary in well-doing, grew weary in all of the things that they were facing. And so the book of Hebrews is urging these individuals to come back. And if you're thinking about leaving, don't do it. Because Christ is the better mediator. There's a better covenant. Better is the book of Hebrews. And so, my friends, here, in these 62 words, in these 3 verses, we are reminded that those that go through these temptations for His name, there's a huge blessing waiting on the other side. Great is your reward in heaven. And I saw a little bit of a reflection here. Paul, who had lived the Beatitudes and was now facing death himself. 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. He says, I know that I have fought, I have done everything that God has asked me to do. Henceforth, there is a crown of righteousness laid up for me. And not for me only, but all those that love His appearing. All those that realize the blessing of living the Beatitudes, even enduring persecution that may come your way. These are things that really get the Sermon on the Mount started. And as the sermon comes to a close about the end of chapter number 7, we're reminded, if you hear these things and do them, you're just like the one that built the house on the rock. When the winds and storms and rains of life come, even through persecution, when you do just as Christ did and stood strong, your house will stand strong. And so, as we conclude the Beatitudes in this 8th lesson, we have been through a journey of seeing what true happiness looks like. And we have asked every single time, within your mind, does that describe you? And I hope it does. My friends, we may never see the persecution like our brethren in the first century did. But when they make fun of you, but when they fire you and you have to find another job, when you face the things that God says are coming your way, recognize that is true happiness. It doesn't sound right, does it? You see, that's the whole process of the Beatitudes. True happiness does not look like worldly happiness. God says there is a way to be happy, and like those in Acts 5 and verse 41, rejoice when those opportunities come your way. And we do call them opportunities. My friends, this morning, if you are a child of the King, that means that you have been baptized, you have been raised to walk in newness of life. God has added you to His Son's church for which He died, and you are one that is to be truly rejoicing and happy. And if that does not explain who you really are, then quite possibly there might be something in your life that's keeping you from that threshold of joy. We want to help you with that. And that may take the prayers of the congregation. It may take a little bit of extra work even in private Bible study. But we are here as a family to tell each of you, we're here to help you with that. But if you need to make that known, if you need to obey for the very first time, being raised to walk in newness of life, or if you need the prayers of the congregation, whatever it may be, we stand here ready to help you. But you have to take the first step. And if you need to take that step, do it today while together we stand and while we sing.